curator of the first Afrofuturist Film Festival. Blackness Revisualized is the name of the festival. It's being produced by the PBS affiliate in New York City, WNET. It will run through January 2022. It will feature 10 films and a playlist. All of this will be free. You can find out more about it on allarts.org. She's also, Celia is also currently developing a feature film, an Afrofuturist thriller called Godspeed. So we should look for that in the future. So without further ado, I would like you to welcome Celia Peters. Celia, take it away.
Hello, everyone. Good evening. Thank you very much, Dorothy, for that introduction. I'm really happy to be here, really excited to be here, talking about something that is very near and dear to my heart and my spirit, which is Afrofuturism. Afrofuturism is a phenomenon that has become a very big deal culturally in America and in fact around the world. It is on the tip of lots of tongues these days, but a lot of people still don't know exactly what it is. So today, this evening, we are going to find out. So welcome to the Educational Guide to Afrofuturism. And I'm gonna be off screen, but I'll still be with you. You'll still be hearing me. Thanks. What is Afrofuturism? It is an exploration of diasporic futures from an Afrocentric perspective. Afrofuturism is a creative cultural movement that puts Black people at the center of our own futures. It explores intersections of technology, science, nature, extraterrestrial life, interdimensional life, time, evolution, among many other things. And here we have one of the projects, one of the films that became really a benchmark for Afrofuturism in this country. It really widened a lot of people's awareness of this phenomena. And this is Black Panther, of course. The term Afrofuturism was first used in 1994 by the writer Mark Derry in an essay that he did called Black to the Future. And his definition in 1994 of Afrofuturism was speculative fiction that treats African-American concerns in the context of 20th century technoculture and more generally, African-American signification that appropriates technology and a prosthetically enhanced future. Well, I can tell you that the definition has definitely expanded and deepened since 1994. A new movement has definitely been born. Afrofuturism is a new way to understand the state of being Black, free of the psychological terrorism and genocidal oppression of the past. Afrofuturism embodies an unapologetic love of Blackness that leaves no space for self-hate. It is a state of mind, a state of mind that is expressed across multiple facets of creativity: literature, music, visual art, style, fashion, and film. And this phenomena includes all aspects of diasporic beliefs and expressions: magical realism, tech, science, aesthetics, design, symbolism, mathematics. Now, when we talk about the roots of Afrofuturism, the roots of it are found in ancient spiritual beliefs born on the continent of Africa. These beliefs influenced Black creatives who then brought new cosmic perspectives to their audiences. And we're going to talk about that in a little bit. But first, I'm going to talk about these roots. Let's talk first about the Yoruba of Nigeria. The Yoruba culture dates back to at least the first millennium BCE. And in their belief system, life is a series of reincarnations. The physical world and the spiritual world are ruled by the sky god Olorun, who owns the sky and everything below it. Now, communication with the spirit world is essential, and that happens through a relationship with orishas. Orishas are primordial, ancestral, nature-based divinities that the faithful worship and tribute to. And many of you are probably familiar with Yoruba culture. Yoruba culture is prolific, and it is the basis for the spiritual belief systems of Cuban Santeria, Haitian Vodun, as well as American Voodoo. And these things obviously expanded into the world through the diaspora. Now, the Dogon people of Mali have had an ancient system of astronomy that dates back to 3000 BC. The Dogon created calendars, calculators, medicine, and pharmacology. And in their origin story, Ama is the supreme god who created the Nomo. And the Nomo were amphibious, hermaphroditic beings who came to Earth from the star system of Sirius B, which at the time when the Dogon origin story came to be, Sirius B was still invisible to the human eye. So that poses a question as to how did they know of the existence of Sirius B? And then last but not least, we have ancient Egypt. In ancient Egyptian culture, there was a complex belief system that was an integral part of life. It was so integral, in fact, that there was no word for religion because the ancient Egyptians did not see their religion or their faith as separate from their existence. There are deities of all levels, but all gods and goddesses of ancient Egypt were involved in the human world. And there was this eternal order of existence. And their deities also took many forms. But the pharaoh was the bridge between the human world and the divine world. And so we will see that in Afrofuturism, these cultures, and there are others, but these in particular are significant. They're probably the most significant with regard to Afrofuturism, and they show up in the DNA of Afrofuturism. So at the beginning of Afrofuturism, we had 20th century Black artists who wanted to be free of America's racial oppression. They were attracted to worlds beyond the here and now, out of a desire to escape what was happening. These artists had very vivid concepts and belief systems that all kind of centered around liberation. Jazz musician Sun Ra was the catalyst for Afrofuturism in modern Black American culture. He was a pioneer and he was a vanguard. And Sun Ra was born Herman Blount in 1914. As a child, he was a musical prodigy, but as a student, as a college student at Alabama A&M University, he described being abducted by aliens, and the experience changed him. At the time, he was playing straight ahead jazz, and he then expanded his sound and he left school and focused on music. And he focused on that cosmic sound that came to define his career. Like the pharaohs, Sun Ra was definitely a bridge that connected his audience to the sense of freedom that could be found in the cosmos. And that freedom really essentially was a mental sort of freedom, freedom of thought, freedom of your mind. In 1974, Sun Ra produced a film, and he starred in the film as well and wrote it. And that film was called Space is the Place. And in this film, Sun Ra rescues Black people using music to transplant them to another planet for life without racism. The political message really reflects how strongly Black people felt about liberation, how strongly Sun Ra felt about liberation. And as you see, he wrapped himself in Egyptian iconography. And he also maintained a connection to the planet that he said that the aliens took him to, which was Saturn. So we're gonna watch a few seconds of the beginning of this. And when you see Sun Ra, notice the figure behind him has no face, has the face of the cosmos.
The music is different here. The vibrations are different. Not like Planet Rave. Planet Rave's sound of guns, anger, frustration. There was no one to talk to up on Planet Rave, if you understand. We set up a colony for Black people here. See what they can do on the planet all their own without any white people there. They could drink in the beauty of this planet. It would affect their vibrations. For the better, of course.
Now, as we see Sun Ra, there's certainly an otherworldly feel to both his presentation and his message. And his message came through music. As did music was also a conduit for other artists who adopted this cosmic sensibility. George Clinton and his band Parliament, along with his alter ego, Star Child, carried that cosmic torch. And, obviously we have the Mothership Connection and we have them in space. And then we also had trailblazing artists like LaBelle and Betty Davis, who were avant-garde and empowered women who knew what they wanted, sexually and otherwise. And for many people, especially at the time, that idea was alien in and of itself. Literature is an area where Afrofuturism arguably may have made its biggest impact. Storytelling is a tradition that goes back millennia in African cultures, and the tradition lives on in Afrofuturism. Afrofuturist writers use the power of the written word they use the power of the written word to create complex worlds where Black people are centered. So they are essentially world builders. Afrofuturist literature has been essential in rooting Afrofuturism in the collective consciousness. Octavia Butler, who I'm sure many of you already know of, is really the empress of Afrofuturist literature. She created and explored political, social, and environmental dilemmas in potential and possible future scenarios. She explored new technologies, both natural and artificial, and also her stories featured humans interacting with other intelligent species. Her work really emerged in the 1970s, and the thing that was most groundbreaking about it is that she centered Black people and people of color and women as full participants in humanity's future. That was a total departure from the science fiction that was happening at the time, which was dominated by white men. Octavia Butler's work certainly was pivotal for me, as it has been for many, many, many people. Samuel Delany is another major Black sci-fi writer. He is the dawn of Afrofuturist literature. His stories embody these complex, high-tech worlds that often feature political and social conflict. And also in these worlds, gender and sexuality are fluid. And he's done all this with characters of color. And there is also a next generation of both veteran and up and coming sci-fi writers, Black sci-fi writers, who are contributing and strengthening and building, expanding the pantheon of Afrofuturist literature. So here we have Walter Mosley, Tananarive Due and her husband, Stephen Barnes, Nisi Shaw, Anthony Joseph, who is actually an Afrofuturist poet, as well as N.K. Jemisin, whose work also veers into the territory of fantasy. We have Cherie Renee Thomas, who is a writer who explores Afrofuturism with a sense of mysticism and folklore that's rooted in African American culture. Cadwell Turnbull is a Caribbean American novelist. Temi O is a British Nigerian writer. Karen Lord, again, is another Caribbean American writer. P. Jelle Clark is an American novelist, and then Tomi Adeyemi, who is also a Nigerian American writer. And then in this world of literature, we also have Itasha Womack, who wrote a nonfiction book called Afrofuturism, which is kind of a seminal, book. It's a seminal piece because it really lays out a lot of foundational information about Afrofuturism and where it comes from. And then we have Nnedi Okorafor, who is a prolific novelist whose work is now, I believe, being developed for the small screen by HBO. And then we have Octavia's Brood, the two writers, Adrienne Marie Brown and Walida Marisha, who've edited this anthology of work. In the world of music, we've seen that artists originally introduced Afrofuturism into America's psyche. Musicians and songwriters and singers really create the soundtrack for Black futures. Sound, as you know, is vibration. And so quite literally, this music and the lyrics create vibes that embody otherworldly possibilities, certainly possibilities that exist beyond where we are right now. Grace Jones is, she's an icon, right? She's a Jamaican American artist who embodies this countercultural persona. And now in her 70s, she is still performing. And she adopted this, I don't want to say adopted, I mean, this is an outgrowth of who she is. But this was happening she was doing what she was doing long before 1994, before this term Afrofuturism was coined. And then across the pond, we have jungle music, which really was an intersection of Black music that was Caribbean music and techno music. And I'm gonna play a little bit of a song, which is like one of the OG jungle songs by a group called the Kemet Crew.
Yeah. All the things they say and the things they do. You can't stop jungle from pleasing you. Yeah. Oh, they try without a reason why. Jungle, yeah, will never die.
I'm having a little technical problem, so I hope that you heard that the nature of jungle definitely has the rhythm of Black music, but it also has this techno electro glitchy feel to it as well. And then we have Miss Erykah Badu, who, you know, very early on had this cosmic, very crunchy persona. It's, you know, sort of cosmic in a different direction than techno, but it's cosmic nonetheless. We have Missy Elliott and artists like Busta Rhymes and Janet Jackson, who explored Afrofuturist sensibilities in their song together as well. And then Andre 3000. I'm gonna play a little bit of one of Missy Elliott's recent pieces where you can see the imagery, but you also hear it in the music.
I'ma start it from the bottom. I'll show you how to flip a dollar. I got food in my dining room. I'm better. It's another day, another chance. I wake up, I wanna dance. So as long as I got my friends, I'm better.
He say I'm hot, I'm so fuego. Pull up on him in my vehicle. He said I'm pretty, you must be from Brazil, it must be from Mexico. Roll up on him in my Latin book. Jump out like skirt, yeah bro. You need a chick like me to make you wanna.
So when we have artists who are pretty much mainstream adopting Afrofuturism, that really speaks to the power of it, how much it resonates with them, but as well as with their audiences. And then we have Beyonce, who's dipped her toes in Afrofuturism, Rihanna, and then, of course, Janelle Monáe, who is one of the biggest Afrofuturist icons that we have right now, both in terms of music and her performance. Her recent album, Dirty Computer, is really it's really a cinematic piece. I mean, she has multiple videos that really tell a story. Aside from these artists, we have King Britt, who is out of Philadelphia, who's been making future forward electronica, funky electronica for a while. And he does his music under his own name, which is King Britt, as well as an act called Floss and Paradigm, which is also him. And Floss and Paradigm, the name is inspired by The Fifth Element, where there was a resort that was called Floss and Paradise. Black Coffee is a South African DJ who, again, has been doing music for a few years, and his sound embodies this kind of electronica that's minimal, that's funky, it's still warm, and it has an undeniable African beat. Kamasi Washington is the jazz musician who has, I think, really picked up the torch and is the heir apparent to Sun Ra's cosmic sound. And Flying Lotus is another electronic artist, an American artist, who's doing this future forward music as well. And then across the pond, we have multiple artists who are doing music in the realm of Afrofuturism. So we have a guy called Gerald, Laura Mvula, who is a singer and songwriter. Ibeyi are two twins who are French and Brazilian, and their music is very much informed by Yoruba culture. Ibeyi means twins in the Yoruba language. The Owini Sigoma Band, UK artist Tricky, as well as the very experimental FKA Twigs. And then to round out our musical tour, we also want to mention Brazilian artists who are now really picking up Afrofuturism. So the country of Brazil has the largest Black population outside of the continent of Africa. And now we see Brazilian artists who see Afrofuturism as a platform to really navigate and go beyond the racial constraints that they have dealt with, continue to deal with, but this is a vehicle for them as well. It's not just a cosmetic expression, it becomes political and social. Now, visual artists illustrate unlimited possibilities for existence in the Afrofuture. They allow us to see meaningful, imaginative visions of unfettered Blackness with mind-blowing clarity. Art reflects the past, present, and future, and everything in between. And here we have work by a few artists, artist James Eugene, John Ira Jennings, who is a professor at University of California, Riverside. We have the artist Underdog, Cyrus Kabiru, who makes these really, mind-blowing glasses, and he has a series of them, which they're really wearable art. We have Osborne Makaria, who's a photographer. And there's some work by yours truly, as well as this Canadian artist, Afro-Canadian artist, who goes by the name of Edge. Artist Wayne Hodge, Josiah Mackey. Lena Victor is a Nigerian British artist who incorporates gold in her work. So she actually works with 24 karat gold, I believe, and she does large scale work, paintings, etc., that are very striking, but obviously gold has a very significant relationship to the continent of Africa. And then we have Oakland's own Joshua Mays, who does incredible, intricate artwork, both as canvases and as murals. And he is based here in Oakland. Quentin Verchetti is a Montreal-based Black Canadian artist. And then we have Alexis Chiverter. In the area of style, we think about the fact that the children of the African diaspora are known for loving adornment. African-rooted aesthetics with future-forward vibes celebrate Blackness in Afrofuturism. There are many, many aspects and many, many iterations of eye-catching Black cosmic style that really go back to our forefathers and foremothers. We see many expressions of both tribal elements as well as techno elements and everything in between. We have a New York designer here. I'm gonna go back for a second to Afia Saki, who is a Kenyan-based accessories designer. And then we have Delta Major, who is based in New York City. And these last two photos are really an example of other stylists adopting this Afrocentric sensibility and aesthetic for editorial spreads. And when we talk about these roots, we think about our foremothers and forefathers, and their distinctive looks had meaning that reflected their connection to the worlds around them. So all of these choices, these hairstyles, the adornment, they had meaning. Afrofuturism reinterprets these shapes and silhouettes and creates a wearable synthesis that's timeless. And as you see, you know, these photos are quite vintage. This hairstyle, the Amasunzu, is from Rwanda in the early 1900s. That looks as futuristic as anything I could think of. We have this Ethiopian woman's hairstyle, very geometric. We have the Fulani woman of Ghana, Namibian woman's style, hairstyle. And here we have a Cameroonian woman from the early 20th century. Now, in the realm of film, there is a very, very fast growing community of filmmakers, of Afrofuturist filmmakers who are flipping the script on science fiction film. Their work is intriguing, it's culturally rich, and it's speculative. And they're telling stories about Black characters. These films inspire imagination and explore Black futures without the limits of time and space or reality as we know it. So we have Afropunk Girl, which is a British short film that now is being developed into a feature film. Hello Rain and Tomb are two of the films that are in the Film Festival Blackness Revisualized, which you can check out at allars.org. Rain is a short film, which is the filmmaker is Nigerian, and then Tomb is a feature film, and that director, Nick Atten, is from Trinidad and Tobago. Welcome to the Terror Dome was an early sci-fi film that was not, because of when it came out in 1995, it wasn't called Afrofuturist, but that is what it is. That is indeed what it is. And it deals with a kind of dystopian future. Battle Dream Chronicle is a film by a director named Alan Bedard, and it is it's a feature film that is a space epic. It's like a space opera, but it really deals with the concept of slavery, just not in the way that it has been expressed in the Western world. The Abandoned is a short film by director Keith Joseph Atkins, and it centers on four men who've been friends for years, who gather regularly for a camping trip. And this year, something happens that has never happened before. And The Abandoned and Battle Dream Chronicle are also in the film festival. I'll show you a little clip of Battle Dream so you can get a sense of
On a le compte?
Of just how unique and special
3000
it
XP.
is.
On a le compte.
Nos règles sont très claires. Tout esclave doit nous livrer 1000 XP chaque mois, en échange de quoi vous recevrez le droit de vivre jusqu'au mois suivant. Vos 3000 XP ne couvrent que votre dette du mois dernier. Que comptez-vous faire pour le mois en cours?
Ce soir, on sera libre ou on sera morte. Mais ce soir, on ne sera plus esclave.
Vous allez bientôt comprendre les vertus de la soumission.
Sokonia.
Tu as perdu une bataille.
So as you can see, really striking, very striking visuals, and a story that is definitely has a lot of meat to it. An oversimplification of her beauty is a feature film that was done by a director called Terrence Nance, which also involves not only live action, which you can see there, the couple that is the lead characters of the film, but it also brings in other elements of animation and other visual art into the story. Roxy 15 is a sci-fi short that involves technology and the life of a programmer named Roxy, whose software becomes infected by a virus that she then learns will come after her. Brown Girl begins is a film by an Afro-Canadian director named Sharon Lewis. And that film is a feature as well. And then we have some other films. The Girl with All the Gifts, I've included that here because the story centers on a Black girl. She's the girl with all the gifts. And it's set in a future that is pretty dystopian, but it also involves elements of real science and botany in particular. Pumzi is a short film that was directed by a Kenyan director, and this film involves a future where water is extremely scarce. And so again, we have an African filmmaker who is taking an issue that exists in the present and transporting it through a story into the future, really exploring how things could go wrong or they could go right. Star Thieves is a short film, as well as the film Sight. And these two films are also included in the film festival. So you can check those out online. Oops, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to do that. And then we have The Golden Chain, which is an animated short film that came out in 2016. And I believe has been added to the Smithsonian's collection of films. The film Souls is a film by a director named Malachi, and this film explores the relationship between a girl and her grandmother and the sense of time, because her grandmother was a NASA scientist, but now is battling Alzheimer's. And so she's losing her memory. And her granddaughter is trying to figure out how to navigate that and how to save her grandmother's memories. And that film, Souls, also features Tabitha Brown. Departure is a sci-fi short by the director Donovan Vincroni, who now goes by Don Azukita. And it really centers on these two beings that are in human form, but they're in the form of two Black humans, which is something that we don't see very often in sci-fi film. And then my project Godspeed, which is in development, is about a woman who is very successful and very driven, and she's created an algorithm that could change the course of humanity. But first, it leads her to question whether she herself is even human. So that film is, the project is in development, and hopefully I'll be sharing it with you soon. And then we have other media projects. So the Universe Souls project is sort of a cosplay, multimedia project. It kind of defies category, and I would highly recommend that you check them out on Instagram. And then we have, in the world of Afrofuturism, this area that is emerging very recently, which kind of takes us, it still involves creativity, but it's taking us really out of the realm of science fiction and really bringing Afrofuturism as a mindset, as an approach into real life. So we have Afrofuturist cultural stewards who are taking this representation to the next level. They go to society's leading edge to build consensus and conscious coalitions to improve Black life from an Afrocentric perspective, with an eye toward a better and brighter future. Black Quantum Futurism is a multidisciplinary artist collective, which is out of Philadelphia. And these two women, Rashida Phillips and Kame Ayewa, really look at the intersection of time and quantum concepts and Blackness. And really the premise of where they're coming from, the basis of where they're coming from is this idea that when it comes to time that the linear time scale was very much developed alongside institutions of imperialism and oppression and colonialism and slavery. And for them, Afrofuturism opens up time on different scales to allow people who have typically been denied access to the future to gain access to the future and regain access to their own histories and origins. So they are definitely taking science to the next level. Ingrid LaFleur is the founder of the Afrofutures Strategies Institute, and she is based both in Detroit and on the continent. She recently has spent much time in South Africa. And the Afrofuturist Strategies Institute is a creative think tank and consulting firm that works with communities and businesses to ethically imagine autonomous potential futures, autonomous potential Black futures in particular, using methodologies based in Afrofuturist principles. And then last but not least, we have the Center for Afrofuturist Studies, which is located in Iowa City, Iowa, of all places. And CAS is an artist residency program that reimagines the futures of marginalized people by creating dynamic workspaces for artists of color. The residencies are interactive, supportive, community engaged, rigorous, and most important, inclusive. And in the area of culture, we also have the Afropunk Festival, which is really a cornerstone of Afrofuturist cultural expression at this point. It started as a documentary film about Black punks, but it has evolved into a multidisciplinary arts festival. And sort of the centerpiece of that is the music festival. The Afropunk Festival started in Brooklyn in 2009, and it has become a vanguard phenomena that embodies a new vision of Blackness that permeates music, art, self-expression, politics, and social justice. And at this point, the Afropunk Festival definitely happens in Brooklyn, but it also happens in Atlanta, London, Paris, and Johannesburg. So Afrofuturism is truly a path to power through liberation of the mind. I'm gonna pop back on here for a second. Well, maybe I won't. Okay. Yeah, so it's really about freeing the mind, because then everything else will follow. It's Afrofuturism embraces this bigger picture where Black people envision themselves, ourselves, in our true greatness, diving into all of the possibilities that the future offers. And that includes, new discoveries, new struggles, new achievements, and glory. But all of that happens on our own terms. So I hope that this has given you a much better, a much clearer idea of what Afrofuturism is, but also I hope that you've heard something in this presentation that inspires you to want to learn more. And if you have questions, I guess, Dorothy, do we have time for questions?
We absolutely do have time for questions. I would like to start by asking one of my own.
Sure.
First of all, I didn't introduce myself. My name's Dorothy Lazard. I'm the librarian in the Oakland History Center. And I think it's interesting that the two of us are together, Celia, because you're talking about the future and I spend all my days focused on the past, but there's certainly things in the past that inform our future.
Yes.
So I just want to start the Q&A by asking, how much do you think today's current racial climate is driving this Afrofuturistic movement? It feels to me, we had Sun Ra and a few other people and a few more in the late 70s and going forward. But it seems to me we've had this real explosion of writers, musicians, film, cinematic theme movies about or showing Afrofuturism. So can you talk about that a bit?
Yes, I think that the current climate and current events are strongly driving the growth of Afrofuturism because our sensibilities have changed, our level of awareness has changed, and we're looking to go beyond the constraints and the violence and the aggression that we're experiencing. But the other piece of that is that technology is also advancing very quickly. So in science fiction in general, what used to be, considered really far off and like something that we might not see in our lifetimes, now a lot of those things are in existence presently. So it's like the technology is growing and is becoming much more of our everyday lives. So I think the combination of those things is really driving Black creators forward, driving and inspiring. Inspiring Black creators as well, because it's about using the imagination, which is what creators do. So, and particularly in times when things are tough, that's, artists really step up at that point.
As they should. We do have a question from Katie Rose, more of a request. I was wondering if you could talk about Afrofuturists who envision new definitions of gender and sexuality. I've enjoyed Rivers Solomon's work and was wondering if you have any additional recommendations.
The first one that comes to mind is Samuel Delaney. I think, perhaps at this point, reading some of what he wrote early on may not seem shocking per se, but at the time he was writing about fluid gender and fluid sexuality as not a thing. He was writing about it as something that wasn't out of the ordinary. And so at the time that was pretty shocking. But nothing is coming to mind at the present, but I will definitely think about that. And if I do come up with something, then I can let Dorothy know, because I will give that some more thought and look around a little bit.
I've also put in the chat a link to some of the Oakland Public Library's resources on Afrofuturism, both fiction and nonfiction. And that's just a bit of it that we have. So there is a link in the chat that leads you to those resources, the lecture books.
I did.
There's another.
You froze.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can now. And I did just want to add to my response to Katie Rose. I would also say you might want to explore the Dogon origin story as well, because one really significant part of that is that these beings, the Nomo, that they saw or see as the sort of origin of humanity, those beings are very clearly identified as being hermaphroditic. So, and that, as you know, with everything, there's meaning for that. There's a reason for that. It's not something that's just random. So that might be a source of, it's ancient knowledge, but it might be something that interests you as well.
We have another statement in the chat. Kieva, I hope I'm pronouncing your name right. I found some cool communities of folks reading Afrofuturism books online. Does anyone know of similar groups for film, online or otherwise? Please put it in the chat if you do know. We can add, Celia has a PDF of resources, and we'll try to add that to a library post that you can all get to. Hopefully we can share that with you. If we can put it in a blog. You've inspired me to write a blog about Afrofuturism. Oh my goodness. So the library, the library has a, I was struggling today with like, what should I write a blog about? I was asked to write a blog, and then now I think I have to write about Afrofuturism. So thank you very much. Any other questions, comments, suggestions? You know, while we wait for incoming questions or comments, what your presentation reminded me of was 1978, the film Alien came out. We all went to see it because, you know, people like being scared. Some misguided people like being scared. But what was so stunning, there were two things that were stunning about it at the time. One, a woman was the lead of what had traditionally been a male space, you know, space as a male space. But more significantly to me and my friends was that there was a Black man in space. And even more profound was that the Black man, the recently deceased Yaphet Kotto, lasted till nearly the end of the movie. In 1978, that was unheard of. We had grown up knowing that the Black person dies first. And so I always see that as something that is maybe, it's certainly not identified as an Afrofuturistic movie, but his role in it to me kind of speaks to the ethos behind Afrofuturism, I think, that survival instinct. Anyway, I just want to say that.
No, absolutely. And I think, though, you would find that Alien and Yaphet Kotto's character in particular has been very inspirational to many Afrofuturist filmmakers, because it's the same as, you know, seeing Lieutenant Uhura. It's like you see that and you see someone who looks like you, and then suddenly everything that's happening in that story and where it's happening is accessible to you. You feel like on a very subconscious level, it's like, yeah, I belong here too.
Absolutely.
You know? So that it's those projects, those films, that series, that's pivotal. Absolutely pivotal, and the influence cannot be overstated at all. And the fact that even after that, we still had quite a while when Black characters were the first to die, you know, in genre, in whether it was horror or sci-fi or whatever. And you know, that's part of the thing driving Afrofuturist filmmakers is like, no, to hell with that. You know what I mean? We don't have to die first. We can be the ones that the whole thing is about.
Exactly. And I think those people are the filmmakers of today are standing in the legacy of that. And then also Romero's film Night of the Living Dead, where the brother ends up lasting. Right. Zombies aren't my favorite genre, but we did see it and was like, oh, it's a Black guy. Right. There's something in the chat from Diane who talks about Brother from Another Planet. Yes. Would you consider that part of this canon?
You know, this is a question that's come up with regard to that film and other things. So Brother from Another Planet was directed by a white director whose name I don't know why is escaping me right now.
Jonathan Sayles.
Yes, John Sayles.
John Sayles.
But the film itself and the message is definitely race conscious. It's about race and social justice. So, you know, and Joe Morton is definitely one of our, you know, as an actor, he's one of our national treasures. So I don't know. I mean, I don't want to answer that question. I can tell you my answer. So generally speaking, for me, Afrofuturism is about Black creators defining their futures and defining their stories, really. But you know, there are some projects that are kind of in this gray area, you know, and I think actually that film also probably came out, I think it came out before 94. So it was before this term had even been coined. But even after Mark Derry's essay, it wasn't like, you know, Afrofuturism as a term became like commonly known. You know, it still was pretty fringe, or pretty niche, I should say. So yeah, Brother from Another Planet. I mean, and it certainly is an important film with regard to the portrayal of Black characters. It's a critical film, actually.
And it was set in Harlem, as I recall.
Yes.
Yeah.
It was definitely a groundbreaking story.
What's been interesting, let's see if there's any more questions. What's been interesting is to watch, you know, there are a few, since we're talking about actors, there are a few people. The one that springs most to mind is Anthony Mackie, who's been in a lot of, and also Janelle Monáe have been in some films where they're dealing with technology, trying to either control or escape from, you know, technical world. Anthony Mackie's been really doing a lot of stuff, and I'm sorry I can't think of the names of many of his movies right at this moment, but check him out on IMDb. He's a great young African-American actor who delves into and gets involved in a lot of projects having to do with the future, technology, surveillance, that kind of thing.
Well, I would also suggest too, there's a series that is on Amazon Prime called The Expanse. And The Expanse it's a Canadian production, but it's very interesting in that it's probably in the 5th or 6th season, or I think 5th season is the last one that's out. And that series the characters are completely mixed in terms of there's every kind of person is represented. But race is not a fact, it's not even mentioned because it's set in a future where basically humanity comes from one of 3 places, either Earth or Mars or the asteroid belt. And those are the things, those categories are what divide people politically more so than anything else, because they're at odds. And there's also differences between them. So as you know, we are of Earth, so we have grown up with gravity. Well, the people on Mars who are from Mars and the asteroid belt have their bodies they look the same, but they function differently because they've grown up in atmospheres that are very different than Earth's atmosphere. So it's a really fascinating thing, but it's also, I have to be honest, it's very liberating to be able to watch really solid, high quality sci-fi stories and see Black characters and other people of color who are not burdened with this, with racism. Like it just is not, it's not because everybody's perfect, but it's just that is not, we don't have time for that. They have other concerns. And so it allows you to dive totally into the story and not, as an audience member, not feel that tension, not feel that sense of dread or that terrorism or all those things that racism brings up. And that's another thing about Afrofuturism that's really driving it. I mean, the films that are in the film festival that I curated, all of those films are independent films. And the filmmakers there's 10 films from 5 different countries. I would say most of them are American, but that we have 5 countries that are represented. And, one thing that, a lot of Black filmmakers are discussing right now especially in the sci-fi space, is this idea that we do not want to perpetuate this thing of this trauma porn, which is where Black suffering and Black pain are being put forth as entertainment. It's not entertaining. It's not entertaining for us anyway. It may be entertaining for other people to watch, but that it's not good for our psyches. It's not good for our collective psyche. And so there's a very purposeful, very purposeful and mindful motivation to create stories centering Black characters that are not exploitative, that are not trauma porn. These are stories that are made first and foremost for Black audiences. And if other people love them, that's great. But the Black audience is who these films are being made for. It's who these films are connected to. So, and certainly, there are plenty of other people who also enjoy these stories. But I think that's a very important thing, because once, as a creator, as a Black person, period, you decide to, reject this exploitation. That in and of itself, whether you're doing it on a personal level or you're doing it as an artist, that is a revolutionary act. And it's a very powerful act, because now these films that are being made, these books that are being written, these songs that are being written and recorded, all of these things are not going away. They're here, particularly in our digital age. Those things will be with us for as long as we're here. And so that is, again, Black creators, Black artists, Black writers telling our own stories, so that we don't have the inaccuracies that have plagued, I'm an American, so I'll speak to the American educational system and the American history books. We don't have that. We're defining ourselves, we're presenting ourselves. And, as you see, we are not a monolith. So there are multiple, endless representations of authentic Blackness. So and obviously you can see that I'm hyped. I'm so excited. I'm so excited about this happening. And I'm so excited about the fact that audiences are now more aware of the fact that this genre exists. And so, because it's creating this energy, that goes beyond entertainment. It goes beyond entertainment. It's bigger than that. So yeah, this is a good time.
Oh, that's great to hear. One thing I want to ask is, like in the 70s, African-American actors and filmmakers, basically refinanced Hollywood, which was suffering mightily. People had stopped going to the movies as much, and, on the backs of a lot of African-American talented people, they, I don't know how to say it, but it bolstered Hollywood financially. I'm wondering, with the massive, unprecedented success of Black Panther, do you see Hollywood, mainstream movie making being just going into overdrive, trying to make the next Black Panther?
Yeah. So at this point, there is definitely a demand for Black content. And that has to do with, so I would say first and foremost, the box office success and cultural, juggernauts of Black Panther, but really the money, because, the film industry is a business. And it really is about the money. And Black Panther made over $1 billion before it had even gone to China. And that's significant because the population is so huge. And so that's another huge step up in terms of box office. But before even, and a lot of productions count on Chinese box office in order to make back all this international revenue. Black Panther had done it before it even got there. So there's that. But also we have the recent events, the events of this past year on top of the pandemic, all of the sort of intensification of state-sponsored violence against Black people, the protests, the demonstrations that have happened, and that are still happening. So that also has sensitized everyone, and no one, the film industry definitely is, is trendy, to say the least, right? But no one wants to be seen as being on the wrong side of that. No one wants to be seen as, so what's the way to show how woke you are? What's the way to show how much you support social justice? Is to be a part of telling these stories. And so it's been interesting to see how that's happened since even, say, last summer. There was a lot of demand for Black stories, and then it kind of turned into this whole thing of like stories that people wanted, production companies wanted stories that were about social justice, which, sort of the subtext was Black suffering, and so then people have kind of shifted and be like, no, this trauma porn thing has got to stop. It's got to stop. And so now people are going on to really innovate. And the other thing is that now there's an awareness on the part of Black creators, just because of how filmmaking has changed technologically. It's changed a lot in the past couple decades for sure. Because now we're at a point where, whereas say like in the 90s or something, where most everything was being done on film, right? And so the only way to really distribute, to get your film to the audience, was to get a distributor who would take it to theaters. Now, obviously, it's a totally different ballgame. It's really about streaming. And, the pandemic really shut down theaters. So then it really became about streaming. So, now people have the awareness that it's about, either getting your film through one of these other conduits, or because of the internet, there are ways you can actually get your film to your audience directly. There are platforms where filmmakers can have a film that's just for sale, and they didn't have to go through a third-party distributor to do that. It takes more work for sure, but it also, if you're a person who knows your audience and the distributor is saying, I don't think Black films sell overseas, that's a mythology that has been put forth for a long, long time. And Black Panther blew that out of the water completely. So, it's like when distributors say things like that Black films don't sell overseas. Now, first of all, we know that's a lie. It's just not, it just is not true, and it's never been true. And it's kind of an attempt, I think, to propagate the kind of bias and racism that's here and project that onto international audiences. The reality is that when it comes to creativity, America's biggest cultural exports have been Black art forms, jazz and hip hop, which literally can be found everywhere in the world, and not just like the original artists. Everywhere in the world, people are adopting, those art forms resonate with people. And so they're doing it themselves in their own languages, dealing with their own struggles, but they understand that dynamic. So we have that. But then on top of the fact that we have non-Black people around the world who identify and want Black art forms, we also have Black people all over the world. So when distributors say Black films don't sell overseas, well, if you go to Western Europe, there's plenty of Black people in Western Europe who've been there for generations. There are Black people in Scandinavia. There are Black people in Asia. There are Black people all over the place. And they certainly want to see Black stories too. So it's like the distributors are choosing to, the people who are saying that are choosing to disregard the Black people who are global, who exist globally. So it really, I feel like at this point, there's most Black filmmakers, certainly in this country, they understand that. They see through it. They know what it is. And they know who they're making films for. So they're not going to be stopped. They're not going to be stopped.
So Celia, I have a question coming in the Q&A.
Mhm.
And this is from Jay. I'm a current MFA integrated design candidate working on a thesis entitled The Effect of Avatar Diversity on BIPOC Engagement in Virtual Spaces. So much of what I'm looking into shows, what I'm looking into shows how we are able to visually express and present ourselves as we build toward post-humanism is of key importance to the future of our people. Afrofuturism is a window into our possible future, not just fantasy. Are there any Afrofuturist works that deal with virtual identity, such as Altered Carbon, that stand out?
Well, that was the first thing that came to my mind was Altered Carbon. I think, I could be mistaken, but I want to say that there are two novels by Samuel Delaney. One is called Babel 17 and one is called Empire Star. And I think that one or both of them deal with those themes. And then, Altered Carbon is just, that's a fantastic example of that. I mean, I think that, and that has Anthony Mackie in it as well. And an actress named Renee Elise Goldberry, who is amazing. And also Simone Missick, who was in Luke Cage, was also in Altered Carbon. And so those three Black actors were featured in the second season of Altered Carbon. Because I think the first season, I don't even think they had any maybe one Black character. But the second season was really centered around those three characters, and it's really amazing. And they didn't continue it, but it's worth watching that second season just for them. But I'm sorry, I'm drawing a blank right now. I'm sorry about that.
My colleague shares, this reminds her, a recent study found that Hollywood loses out on nearly $10 billion, billion with a B, every year by undervaluing TV and film projects about and by Black creators.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Camille, for that factoid. That's an enormous amount of money and cultural oversight, I would say.
Well, it's an enormous amount of money, and it's also a startling and staggering testament to the degree to which some people are committed to racism and to, sort of evading reality. The fact that the figure, that the dollar amount is that high means as a business, that is a huge failure. It's a huge failure. And the fact that people would be willing to fail on that scale really speaks to something else. I think we've seen this in the political arena, this idea of this fear, because I think that's a lot of what it has to do with, is the fear of annihilation, a fear of being replaced, all of that stuff. I mean, that, it really is that. And the sad, well, I don't know if it's sad, but the fact of the matter is that, evolution and change and growth are inevitable. They're going to happen. So, it can happen one way, it's like you can either be a part of it or you can not be a part of it, but it's going to happen.
Yeah. Are there any more questions in the chat? Questions, comments? Oh, someone's asking, Diane's asking, can you comment on Lovecraft Country and Watchmen?
Yeah.
And we have about 8 minutes left, Celia.
Okay, I'll make it quick. Bravo. Bravo to both of them. someone asked about the like the online viewing groups. I actually was in a group that we watched Lovecraft Country and Watchmen weekly, as a group. And it was a group of BIPOC viewers. And we might have had a couple of white members, but it really was about watching it through this lens of Afrofuturism. I think that both of those series really were amazing examples of Afrofuturist storytelling. And the whole idea that there were Black people, quote unquote, running the show. I mean, really, doing the writing and doing the directing really speaks volumes, because it doesn't take every person on the team to be Black, but it does take the people who are sort of driving the project. It makes a difference. It makes a difference, because there's certain ways that characters will not be shown when there's someone Black who's writing and directing it, because they're not going to be shown in ways that are inauthentic. It's not about every Black character being a good character, but it's about all of them being authentic characters. And that authenticity is what resonates with the audience, regardless of who the audience member is. When you're dealing with something real, you feel it, it shows. And so that both of those series, I think, are, really, really prime examples of the power of that. And the fact that they were so successful, is a reflection of that.
Any more? Oh, wait a minute. We got another question coming in. Oh yeah, I answered his question. All righty. So everyone, thank you for attending this program. I want to make sure that I say that this webinar will be saved on the Oakland Public Library's YouTube channel. So definitely look for it. By next week, it should be up. And my colleague is saying in the chat that we'll also email anyone with tickets through Eventbrite. We'll share updates with them, and keep an eye out for Dorothy's blog. Someone is saying, thank you, Camille. Now I have to add something else to my to-do list, but I really enjoyed tonight's program. I learned a lot. Remember, www.allarts.org is where you will find the Blackness Revisualized Film Festival that Celia is the curator of. 10 films from 5 countries. Look for it.
It's all free, because this is public media. All Arts is the online platform for WNET, which is a public television station. So this is all accessible for free. And
the film festival will run through January 2022. So you have some time to catch all the films if you like.
For sure. Oh, right on. The engineer. Yay.
Any other questions before we shut it down tonight?
Well, thank you very much for this opportunity. I really, really, really appreciate it. And thank you for all of the positive feedback. I'm glad that, this resonated with you. You're very
It absolutely did. So thank you so much, Celia. Thank you, Camille, behind the scenes. And we have a lot to learn about Afrofuturism and have learned a lot tonight. Thank you all the attendees. Bye.
Good night.
Night.